Hi, thanks very much for coming to see all of us tonight. Thank you on my behalf. So, British Rail Manual, we'll get onto that in a minute, but not many of you probably know who I am. So I work for a company called Koto, and this is the work we do. I'm not going to tell you about all the projects because that's not what tonight's about, but you might be interested to know a little bit on our background. So Coca-Cola, Airbnb, lots of little tech brands, FMCG, that's that. But what got me onto trains was when I did my MA. So I wanted to renationalise the railways. It had to be done. It's an absolute disgrace what we've got now. That's my opinion. So I went through the process of designing a new identity. So it started on paper, moved through the paces as to what it looks like at different sizes, line weights and scales. I got really nerdy about it. It was a bit of a fetish, but I looked at signing in railway stations is awful. So could you run great big LED screens down the platforms without people slipping over maybe? And various things like that. So when you went up to your train, what would it look like? Where would your seats be? What stations is it going to call at? Then what's the app look like? We won't get into all of that, but I did design a paper ticket as well, because not everything can be solved by an iPhone. Then, this is when it got a bit dark. This wasn't a good time in my life. This was eBay every night. I had to know what was out there, what was I missing, and I began to collect it all. So it would be a pin badge, with not even a British Rail train for some reason. Timetables. I didn't read them, didn't go that far, don't worry. But actually some of the illustrations and some of the things that British Rail was producing were pretty amazing. They don't conform to the guidelines, of course, because nobody follows guidelines. That's boring. Because you end up with things like this, which I kind of like, actually. Or just go and eat, why not? But this is pretty cool. I like this one. They did a good job with that. I think it looks a lot like the night bus timetables we get for TfL. So tonight's talk's broken into two pieces. The first part's about British Rail, just a little sort of insight as to who they are, what they did, why it's important that we think about all the graphics they produced. The second half is the making of the book. I'd like to say the pain of it, but I'll try and stay positive. So what made the British Rail identity? Part one. It wasn't the flying saucer that they produced that was nuclear fusion driven, but it does say something about the company. They were forward thinking. They tried to do everything they possibly could to be at the forefront of transportation and sometimes their uniforms. Maybe not so relevant and useful these days. But it was four core elements that made the identity. It was the colours, nice and drab, a little bit of highlight in places. It was the typeface. This typeface was in two versions. It was a positive and a negative. If you want to go a little bit nerdy, it's because when you put a white typeface on a dark background, it fluoresces, so it gets a little bit thicker, so they had to make two versions. The logo type, there's a bit of controversy around there as to who really drew the typeface. Was it Jock Kinnear? Was it Jerry Barney who designed the symbol? I don't know, my book says it's Jerry Barney, but lots of other people might say differently. And then the symbol, of course. When you look at the symbol, it's designed on a grid. Whether it was designed on the grid or the grid came after, I'm not exactly sure. Nobody can really quite remember. Although it was designed on the back of an envelope on the tube, so probably not on the grid at that point. But it's really important that this exists. I'm told that I'm the biggest grid nerd. I think whoever made this is the biggest grid nerd. Because when you think about the 1960s, they didn't have computers. They didn't have the ability of an EPS file. You just chuck that in an email and send it to someone. Somebody had to get a ruler out, a pencil, or masking tape and a paintbrush and put it on the side of a ship or on the side of a train. So this is how you reproduce it. It has to be to the millimetre. It has to be to the inch. But the manual covered way more than all those details. It was the applications that I think really make the manual what it is. So what it looks like on a ship. The uniforms. random bits of paper you find in a buffet cart on a train. You'll still see this today, the actual road signing, because that hasn't changed from the 60s. And this was done before British Rail, so they were able to include it in the manual. And then the famous Intercity 125. But there were all of these pages as well. That's not even halfway. I shouldn't actually be including this because I'm kind of giving away the book now. But and the point about the manual was that it also includes an addenda at the back of this reproduction. The original manual, there is no complete manual. It's been consistently updated, reproduced so many times, and updates were made that nobody has the British Rail manual. So the only place that you can actually read the full book or the full identity guidelines is in the reproduction, which is quite rare, I think. So part 2, this lonely sort of railway station. This is what I always think of my Kickstarter backers. So Kickstarter is how I funded the book. I'm pretty sure all you guys know what Kickstarter is, but it's a crowdfunding platform. And the book was late. It was about 8 months late, and there's still people complaining and moaning at me. And this is kind of what I think. They're sort of sitting there waiting for this British Rail identity book to come. And to quote someone on the internet, and it was, "Why is this book about as late as a British Rail train?" Sort of sums up sort of the feeling. I thought it would take about 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. Yeah, I'll be fine. I'll just knock it out, scan some pages in. You know, someone will have them. They'll email them to me. But let's get it all done. It took a year to actually make it, to the despite of my bosses, my friends, my colleagues, my girlfriend. It's a year of British Rail every single day. So what happened to the other 215 days? Well, spreadsheets, things like this. This spreadsheet plots where every single sheet of the manual is in the world or the UK. So we had to go and locate these. Then you move on to the next spreadsheet, which is how you make a book. How is it paginated? Where are the throwouts? Where are the colours sitting? I didn't think about this. I was like, books are easy. They involve spreadsheets and horrible things. When you organise the shoot, a lot of people here probably do photo shoots, but I doubt you do a shoot that involves organising old bits of paper and making sure they go back in the right place. That was pretty tedious and unenjoyable. But it was shot on a Hasselblad, and that got me excited. I was really pleased. I was like, yes, a Hasselblad, finally on a shoot. And then the photographer, John Short, I rate him more than anyone else. He's so fastidious. At points, I was like, that'll do, John, that's fine. And he's like, no, every single piece of dust must be gone. And we shot it underneath museum glass. That's how we got the pages so flat, because they weren't scanned, they were shot. The museum glass got rid of the reflections. Trade secret, but that's fine, you can have it. Then you come on to the point, well, there's got to be new content to make this book, so what does it look like? I could have followed the old guidelines, used Universe, wasn't so sure. This book was going to be big, it was going to be heavy, and I thought, you're reading it from a distance, so maybe it should follow the signing guidelines. So I referenced this page. This looks at the leading, and which is one X height between X heights. I was a little bit tight on some tests, so I moved it on and I put 25% in. This is all getting a bit dry, a bit boring, but it kind of shows the point that every detail has to be considered. I couldn't go to bed at night thinking, should the leading be 1 point more? Don't know. This was it. And then when it was actually printed, this is how it came out. So the book's got an interview of Jerry Barney, which was amazing to get his insight into what it was like to be a designer in the 60s, coming through, and he still designs on paper now. He doesn't have a computer. He only uses it for email. And that all comes through in the interview if you get a chance to read it. A lot of measuring. You've got to get it exactly right, and even if it doesn't look great, I kind of maybe made the mistake of following the rules a little bit too much. Checking whether it's the right typeface. The original manual was actually in Helvetica, not the British Rail manual. Print tests. Then we've got actually like wet tests, and then what does rail blue look like? Nobody really knows. You've got colour values back and forth. I had these dreams of mixing my own ink and having cans of it, and I could use it for all sorts of things. In reality, it was just a curve and a CMYK print. But it was there, the thought went into it. You've got to be used to your living room looking like this if you want to do a book. Every single night, everything spread out at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then this is it. You send the artwork to print, and you think, yes, brilliant, I'm done. I'm going to go on holiday now. This is it. I'm going to just relax. I'm going to have my feet up. No. This is what happens when you order £16,000 worth of paper. And then you go to the printers, and it's early in the morning, and you're just like, oh God, why did I do this project? I'm tired. But the printer was incredible. It was a £1 million press. It had an HUV, sorry Park, I'm not sure if you've got one, but you should get one. It's got an HUV dryer on the other side. This is what allowed it to be pin sharp because the ink didn't sink into the paper. Every single page was checked against the original manual. Were we getting it right? Were the colours balanced? The other things that you don't think about, what happens when it goes across a spread? Do the colours match on each side? Do you want to punch the red up a bit? And if you do that, down the book, you're going to get a blue page. It's, yeah, a nightmare. So this is what the book turned out as. It was a hardback. It was a 2-colour foil, 2 spot covers, 252 images, 372 pages, 5 throwouts, they're the double page throwy out ones, and 5 written contributions. And then this is what it looked like. This is the page that I always refer to. If I'm ever going to show it to someone, I always think, this is it. This page was printed in 1966, and we're 50 years later, and we've photographed it, and then reprinted it, and then it's actually been shot again, and the detail is so sharp, and it's, yeah, it does it for me. That's the page. And then that's it. Available in all good bookshops and my site.